Hello, everyone. Today, I will be talking to you guys a little bit about rhetoric. My name is Odorico San Nicolas, and I am a senior at Tinian High School, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. The first question that you might be having is, what exactly is rhetoric? Well, rhetoric is defined as the art of effective or persuasive speaking or writing. Rhetoric uses these figures of speech and other compositional techniques to persuade or to effectively speak or write. Rhetoric's language that is designed to have a persuasive or impressive effect on its audience. Basically, rhetoric is the art of becoming an effective or persuasive speaker and writer by understanding what rhetoric is, by understanding the situation in which you need to use rhetoric. Now, why rhetoric? Rhetoric is important in life because it is used in our daily lives. It teaches us how to clearly convey arguments, concerns, etc. It is around us constantly and it gives you the ability to persuade. Rhetoric is useful in life because it makes you a successful speaker, it makes you a successful writer, but most importantly, it makes you a successful thinker. Rhetoric is important because it is around us. And when I mean that it's around us, I mean that it's everywhere. It could be in your classroom, at home, and you're not even realizing it because you don't understand the concept of rhetoric. Rhetoric is the ability to persuade or effectively speak or write. So if you were, for example, looking to buy a new cell phone at IT&E, of course the salesperson is going to try and get you to buy the most expensive product. Why? Because that's what they want. And you're sitting there and you're gonna hear them say that this is the best phone for you because it's this, it has the best camera, it has the fastest data speeds, and you're thinking in your head, yes, I want something like that. But you didn't realize that that was rhetoric. Rhetoric is around us constantly, and once we understand how to use rhetoric, it teaches us how to convey what the message we're trying to give out to people. It is the ability to persuade or effectively speak or write. Now, there are several ways you can manipulate rhetoric. First is persuasion, second is personal gain, third, food for thought, and fourth, enhance your ability to speak and write formally. The first one, persuasion, is simple. You use rhetoric to get something that you want, to do something that you want to achieve by persuading another or even persuading yourself to do something. And when I say persuading yourself, you're probably thinking, how can I persuade myself to do something? But have you ever been to a restaurant and you didn't know what to order? You're like, I don't know, should I get this cheeseburger or should I get the short ribs from Shirley's, right? So you begin to use like different facts and different factors of what each meal would offer you to persuade you to getting one of the two. Now, persuasion can result in personal gain. So when you manipulate rhetoric to use persuasion, in the end, you can still benefit personally, otherwise known as personal gain. Like the salesperson at IT&E, if you did buy the most expensive product, they would have what the most expensive product that you just bought in their sales report for that day. What does that mean? That means they had a successful day at work and they used rhetoric to get it, and you didn't even realize it. The salesperson probably wouldn't have known it either. But rhetoric is constantly around us, and I keep reiterating this because it is, and we don't realize it until we understand what rhetoric is, and that's what I'm trying to do for you all today. Rhetoric is one person's or one's ability to effectively speak and write. And I said this a couple of times already throughout the presentation, but it's always important to remember what rhetoric is so you can see it happening in real life. You see it happen in classrooms, you see it happen in restaurants, church even. Rhetoric is just everywhere, and understanding rhetoric would help you become a better speaker and writer, even a better thinker. Now, third, we have food for thought. And this is where thinking comes into play. When you ask people rhetorical questions or questions that um, don't really need an answer, right? Because you're just trying to get the message to them. So using rhetoric in a way to get people to think is what food for thought means. Um, in mock trial, I was a participant for a couple years, and you know, we never realized how important rhetoric is until we see it happening constantly. And every year that I've been a mock trial, I've used either of the three appeals that I'll talk about in the future, later in this presentation, of rhetoric to get my argument across. And rhetoric allows people to think. Now, in mock trial, you have jury members or acting jury members who are judging you, essentially. So when you deliver yourself, when you present your argument in court, you want them to think. You want to give them a message to remember, and you want to be able to convey what your argument is clearly, concisely, but still get the effect that you want from your argument. Now, rhetoric allows people to think. Rhetoric allows people to persuade, and rhetoric allows people to do. When you allow people to think freely, and when you give someone a rhetorical question to begin to think, they get all of this outside information and they compare and contrast and they get everything for rhetoric. And you don't realize that rhetoric is part of it. Rhetoric also enhances your ability to speak and write formally. Sorry about that. It enhances your ability to speak and write formally, and regardless, rhetoric will help you become a better speaker, thinker, and writer. Down here, I have a short picture. Just a single picture of Aristotle's triangle. Now, this picture depicts what Aristotle used to symbolize the art of rhetoric. And in the middle, you have text. Up here, you have the writer, otherwise known as the sender. Down here, you have the reader. And across it, you have the subject or message. What does this picture mean? It simply means that the text is the center, right? So the text is in the middle because the text is what you will go off of. Now, the writer uses the text to send the message to the reader. The reader receives that message from the sender, and in the end, it comes out understanding the true message of the text. Now, a lot of poetry does this. Poetry allows you to read lines of the poem and you're thinking one thing, but at the end of the entire poem, you're like, this was not what the poem meant. The poet meant to advocate for something else. Now, the subject is down here because the subject influences the writer influences the reader, and then the reader receives the message, which was the influence of the writer's text. Now, the text is in the middle because the subject is the subject of the text, the writer is the writer of the text, and the reader is the person who is reading the text. Now, back to when I was talking about rhetorical appeals, you should know that there are three. The rhetorical appeals are the three elements of persuasion as defined by Aristotle. Now, the three elements are logos, ethos, and pathos. And these elements are seen in all different types of literature, even in schools, and that's why I say that, or that's why a lot of people say, not just me, that rhetoric is around us constantly. Logos, ethos, pathos. What is logos? Well, logos is a literary device that can be defined as a statement, sentence, or argument used to convince or persuade the targeted audience by employing reason or logic. For example, this quote is from Aristotle's The Art of Rhetoric. So this is from Aristotle's piece on rhetoric himself, and it says, "All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal." Now, this uses logic to convey the message that Socrates is immortal, regardless of what your belief is. And this is because all men are mortal, like right here. And if Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal, because all men are mortal. Now, ethos, on the other hand, is an appeal to the ethics, and it is a mean of convincing someone of the character or credibility of the persuader. Now, this means you use research, and you use education, and you use something that is credible to persuade, to effectively speak or write. to get your point across. For example, the doctors all over the world recommend this type of treatment. Now you're sitting back and you're like, how is this ethos? Well, it is ethos because when you hear the words doctors all over the world recommend, you're thinking this treatment is the treatment for me. Why? Because the doctors from all over the world recommend it. And those doctors are credible sources of information. Those doctors are the people who you trust because they are educated, because they are credible. Now, moving on to the last one, which is pathos, it is an appeal to emotion and it is a way of convincing an audience of an argument by creating an emotional response. So, unlike logos and ethos, pathos has to deal with what's inside, it has to deal with how you feel towards the text. And an example of something that is pathological appeal. It is a soft instrumental symphony because it may arouse people emotionally. And you're thinking, I don't know how this applies because we're not talking about, we're not quoting something, we're not talking about a text. But like I said, rhetoric is all around us. And in Sarah McLachlan's videos for animals or movies in which loved ones die or pass, there's always that soundtrack. And that soundtrack is what gets you to cry, not the situation. Or it could be, it could be what's happening in the movie. And that's still pathos because what you're seeing is making you emotional. What you're seeing is appealing to you emotionally and it's persuading you to be in favor of whatever party it is. Now, whenever someone dies in a movie, at least in the ones I've watched, there has always been a soft instrumental symphony or something sad. And it's similar to like horror movies where when you can tell when the main parts are gonna happen because something's gonna pop up, and you know because the soundtrack it starts speeding up. And if you haven't noticed, you might think, whoa, this was out of nowhere, but it's the soundtrack that gets you indulged in the video and it gets you indulged in the movie and therefore appeals to you emotionally. These are some helpful sites for you to understand what rhetoric is more in depth. I've shortened the links for you so you can go ahead and type these down on the URL search bar on Google Chrome, Microsoft, Mozilla Firefox, and Internet Explorer, whatever browser you prefer to use. And I've gone ahead and titled what sites they were relevant for. So it is what is rhetoric, Aristotle's rhetoric, and just rhetoric in general. So go ahead and look into those sites if you need more help. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and before I sign off, I'd like to leave you with this quote from Aristotle. And it says that it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. And that's because this relates to rhetoric. Once you understand rhetoric, you'll be able to use it. Once you understand rhetoric, you'll be able to notice it when it's happening in front of you. So it's really helpful to understand the things that happen constantly in your life, such as rhetoric, just so that we're more aware, just because we're more knowledgeable and because it would be better for us all. Thank you.
Ready?